Rain meant that 41 overs were lost on the opening day of the LV County Championship match between Derbyshire and Sussex in Derby, but that was enough time for the visitors to gain an advantage. Play didn't get underway until 2:30 following Tuesday's countrywide rain, and so there was no surprise that Ed Joyce asked the top flight's bottom club to have a bat first. It was the 6th time in all competitions that Derbyshire have lost the toss, yet it was they who got off to a quick start in the damp conditions, with Chesney Hughes smashing the 15th ball of the match for a 6. On a very green pitch on which you'd expect batting to be really difficult, Hughes and his opening partner Billy Godleman got their side off to a rather hectic start. The bat was beaten, but there were also some cracking shots from the team, which came into this match on the back of 3 straight defeats to Middlesex, Nottinghamshire and Yorkshire. 3 games they may have lost heavily, but for large parts had matched their opponents. Hughes, of course, hit 270 not out in the innings defeat to Yorkshire, but he couldn't match that here as he drove at and edged this ball from the returning Steve McGoffin to Joyce, who clung on well in the slips. In spite of that loss, Derbyshire continued to score their runs at a good rate, with their captain Wayne Madsen now taking up the mantle. He, like Hughes, has been in good nick so far this summer, and he was maintaining the positive approach of his openers. Such positivity also led to the loss of Godleman, who edged another aggressive drive off Chris Jordan and was snapped up by Luke Wells on 26. So Shivnarine Chanderpaul entered the fray for his 300th first-class appearance, with his side on 71 for 2 in the 17th over, and he was perhaps fortunate not to be back in the pavilion quickly. The picture suggests that he did indeed get his bat to this ball from Jordan before it thumped into the gloves of Ben Brown. Of course, if there are any players who let such things affect them, then Chanderpaul is most definitely not one of them, and he kept his side going before tea with a couple of boundaries. Alas, the rain then returned to the East Midlands and the players were soon back in the pavilion. That rain seemed to affect the surface some more, if this delivery from McGoffin is anything to go by. Such things can get into a batsman's mind, even Chanderpaul, and he was then given a life when dropped at slip by Michael Yardy off the unlucky James Anyon. Yardy will have been thrilled that it wasn't an overly costly mistake, as 15 minutes later, summing up the surface, Chanderpaul horribly mistimed this shot off McGoffin to be caught in the covers for 20 at 113 for 3. It was still a good effort from the home side, who were perhaps fearing the worst after losing the toss against this fine Sussex seam attack and then suffering with the news that Wes Durston couldn't play because of a back problem. Madsen continued to look for runs whenever he could get them, and these 2 fours came off the same Jordan over. His innings was already an important one for his team. Now here's something no gentleman wants to see. The usual giggles from the fielding side followed, with Dan Redfern's voice suddenly becoming an octave or 2 higher. And the red-faced Redfern was out 2 balls later, Anyon getting a ball to stay a little lower this time to win the LBW decision, which left the home side on 128 for 4. Redfern had gone for a duck. Madsen, however, was still there, and for the 3rd time this summer he was able to celebrate a half-century. It came courtesy of his 8th boundary from the 113 deliveries he'd faced. Given what he was up against, this was a very fine knock indeed from the talented Derbyshire captain. His one wish now would have been to turn that into 100, something he's yet to do in the First Division so far this year. He welcomed Monty Panesar into the attack belatedly with his favourite shot, a well-controlled square cut which had brought him the lion's share of his runs in this particular innings. And with Ross Whiteley also looking to get on top of the left-arm spinner, Derbyshire would have been hopeful of seeing out the day with no further losses. But that wasn't to be, as in the penultimate over of the day, Madsen received something unplayable, even with 63 runs under his belt, from Jordan. It was the kind of wicket which has bowlers salivating. That meant that debutant Ali Evans, a Scottish player who was making his championship debut, had to come out with just minutes remaining, and he was out of the 3rd ball he faced, padding up in front of his stumps to Panesar. So it was Sussex who ended the day the happier of the 2 teams, having reduced their host to 158 for 6 in 55.4 overs. The remainder of the Derbyshire batsmen will see what they can achieve before they leave it to their bowlers to see if they can extract as much out of this pitch as the visitors' attack has done.